It's a terrifying thought, to enter the domain of one of nature's most efficient predators. I've read accounts of shark attacks that still haunt me. One that stands out is the story of Anthony White, a marine biology student in California. He ignored the prominent warning signs and paddled out, seeking the perfect wave near a seal rookery, a known habitat for great white sharks. The attack that followed was swift and fatal. The summer of 2014 brought perfect weather to Surf Beach, California. Sunshine filtered through the morning mist, painting golden patterns on the glassy ocean surface. Anthony White, 22, was exactly what you'd expect from a California marine biology student with a passion for surfing. His friends described him as a perfect mix of fearless adventure and a deep respect for ocean life. He was known for his infectious enthusiasm and tendency to seek out remote breaks, but he was also methodical, always researching surf spots and ocean conditions before paddling out. They had spent weeks planning this solo dawn patrol session, and this morning adventure was meant to be the perfect combination of his two passions, surfing and marine biology. The college student had arrived at Surf Beach just as the sun was rising, spending his first hour checking conditions and waxing his board at the remote location. But Anthony had been restless, telling other early morning surfers that the real waves were beyond the crowded spots, despite the area being adjacent to a massive seal rookery at Point Conception. On that fateful morning, Anthony set out early, carrying his 6.2 shortboard and minimal safety gear. He had signed the beach access log indicating he planned to surf the main break. But somewhere along the way, Anthony spotted what looked like perfect waves breaking further offshore. Despite the prominent warning signs about marine life in the area, Anthony paddled out about 150 yards from shore to position himself in the lineup. The area was beautiful, too beautiful to resist, with seals barking in the distance and crystal-clear water revealing the sandy bottom below. While setting up for the perfect wave, Anthony suddenly noticed something that should have alarmed him. The water was unusually quiet, with no other surfers in sight, and the seals had stopped their constant chatter. But he was so focused on catching the wave of the day that Anthony ignored these warning signs. Finally, Anthony had positioned himself perfectly in the lineup and was sitting on his board, legs dangling in the water. Then, suddenly, a terrifying silence fell over the ocean. Out of nowhere, there it was, a massive great white shark emerging from the depths, just 20 feet below where Anthony was sitting. What Anthony didn't realize was that he had entered the domain of one of nature's most efficient predators. Great whites are living fossils that have remained virtually unchanged for millions of years. Their torpedo-shaped bodies are perfectly designed for explosive attacks. These apex predators can detect blood from up to 500 yards away and sense the electrical impulses of a beating heart from several meters distance. When hunting, great whites approach from the depths in explosive bursts of speed exceeding 35 miles per hour, using the element of surprise to deliver devastating attacks with bite forces reaching up to 4,000 pounds per square inch. Anthony reacted instantly, but there was nowhere to run. The massive predator struck from directly below, covering the distance between them in a split second. Anthony managed to see the shark's massive form just before impact. but the attack came with such explosive force that both he and his surfboard were launched into the air. The sound of Anthony's screams cut through the morning silence as the shark's jaws clamped down on his torso. He fought desperately, punching at the predator's snout as it held him in its powerful grip, the massive head shaking violently as razor-sharp teeth sliced through flesh and bone. The great white released Anthony after several seconds, typical behavior for these predators when encountering unfamiliar prey. But the damage was already catastrophic. Blood immediately began clouding the pristine water as Anthony, despite his severe injuries, began paddling frantically toward shore on his damaged board. The shark circled below, following the blood trail but maintaining its distance, waiting to see if this strange prey would weaken enough to approach safely. Anthony managed to cover nearly half the distance to shore, his movements becoming weaker and more erratic as blood loss and shock overwhelmed his system. A jogger on the beach heard Anthony's desperate screams and immediately called for help, but the remote location meant rescue was still minutes away. By the time lifeguards arrived, Anthony had disappeared beneath the surface, the ocean swallowing him whole. 2 hours later, Anthony's mangled surfboard washed ashore, bearing the unmistakable crescent-shaped bite marks of a great white shark. The massive gouges told the story of an encounter with one of nature's most efficient predators. Anthony's body was never recovered despite extensive search efforts. The university established a memorial scholarship in his name, and Surf Beach was temporarily closed while marine biologists studied great white activity in the area. The attack led to enhanced warning systems and additional safety briefings for surfers. As the sun set over the California coastline, the memory of Anthony White served as a stark reminder. Bull sharks can appear virtually anywhere there's water, from the open ocean to golf course ponds miles inland. That's a thought that stayed with me ever since I first read about them. Their unique adaptation allows them to swim far up rivers and into freshwater lakes where other sharks cannot survive. It's a chilling reminder of the ocean's unforgiving power. But let me tell you about a specific morning, September 3rd, 2015. Hundreds of miles from the Pacific, in the murky waters of Galveston Bay, Texas, the sky dawned a brilliant blue. There was just enough offshore breeze to create ideal fishing conditions. David Walter, a 26-year-old first-generation immigrant, had built his charter fishing business from nothing. He was the kind of entrepreneur who embodied the American dream. On this day, he couldn't have asked for better weather to take 4 tourists from Dallas on what he hoped would be the fishing trip of their dreams. Friends described him as methodical and safety-conscious, always checking his equipment twice, but also driven by an almost obsessive desire to give his customers the perfect fishing experience. These Dallas tourists were celebrating a bachelor party, and David had promised them action in the productive waters near the Galveston jetties. They'd spent the first few hours pulling in red snapper and speckled trout, David expertly managing the boat as the cooler filled with their catch. He navigated to his favorite spot, just 1 mile offshore, where the depth dropped to 25 feet, attracting schools of bait fish and the predators that hunted them. The tourists were having the time of their lives, already talking about booking another trip. But as they prepared to move to a new location for the afternoon bite, disaster struck. The boat's engine coughed, sputtered, and died completely, leaving them drifting in the strong Gulf current toward the busy shipping channel. David immediately diagnosed the problem: a clogged fuel filter, which should have been a simple fix. But as he worked on the engine, the boat's anchor began dragging in the powerful current. The situation was becoming dangerous, and David knew he had to act fast. Local charter captains had warned about recent unusual activity in the area, but such warnings were common in Texas waters. The water had been murky since recent storms, making it harder to see what might be lurking beneath the surface. David had fished these waters for years without incident, and he reasoned that the popular fishing spot would be safe with other boats nearby. With his clients growing nervous about their drifting boat, David made a fateful decision. He stripped down and dove overboard to manually reset the anchor, hoping to stabilize their position while he fixed the engine. What David didn't know was that he had entered the hunting grounds of one of the Gulf's most dangerous predators, the bull shark. Their aggressive temperament and willingness to investigate anything in their territory makes them responsible for more unprovoked attacks on humans than any other species, except great whites. This particular 7-foot bull shark had been patrolling the fishing grounds for hours, drawn by the chum slick created by David's successful charter. The predator's incredibly acute senses detected the electrical fields generated by David's rapidly beating heart and the scent of blood from hundreds of yards away. What happened next occurred with shocking speed. David never saw the shark coming through the murky water. The bull shark struck from behind, its massive jaws clamping down on his leg with crushing force before immediately releasing and circling for another attack. The impact was so violent that David's clients heard his muffled scream through the water. David fought desperately to reach the surface, but the bull shark continued its relentless assault. True to their species' aggressive nature, the predator struck again and again, each bite tearing away more flesh. The shark's persistence was terrifying. Once committed to an attack, bull sharks rarely give up, continuing until their prey stops moving. The multiple attacks created a feeding frenzy mentality, and the murky water became a churning mass of blood and violence. David's clients watched in horror as the water around their boat turned red. They screamed for help and radioed the Coast Guard, but David had already disappeared beneath the surface, overwhelmed by the bull shark's relentless assault. The Coast Guard arrived nearly an hour later, finding only David's torn shorts floating in blood-stained water. The bull shark had vanished into the murky depths, leaving behind only traumatic memories for 4 witnesses. There's a story they tell in every boating safety course along the Texas coast. It's a cautionary tale about a charter business that died when its owner, David, vanished into the Gulf. His body was never found, but the Gulf's bull sharks, they hunt in murky shallows. Thousands of miles away, in Hawaii's crystal-clear waters, another predator was about to show why it's earned the most terrifying nickname in the ocean. This time, it would happen under cover of darkness, where even paradise becomes a hunting ground for nature's most indiscriminate killer. The evening of April 22, 2016 brought perfect conditions to the remote coastline near Hana, Maui. A gentle trade wind rustled through the palm trees as the sun painted the sky in brilliant tropical colors. Christian Smith, 24, couldn't have asked for better conditions for his solo fishing adventure at one of his secret spots along Maui's untouched coastline. Christian. He embodied that laid-back Hawaiian lifestyle that draws so many to the islands. With his easy smile and encyclopedic knowledge of hidden fishing spots, he'd become a local favorite at the surf shop where he worked. Friends described him as fearless and independent, always venturing to remote locations that other anglers avoided, constantly searching for the perfect fishing experience that only the islands could provide. That evening, Christian loaded his truck with heavy tackle, designed for the large predatory fish that hunt Hawaiian waters after dark. The location he'd chosen was breathtakingly beautiful, but completely isolated. A secluded beach accessible only by a rough dirt road winding through dense tropical vegetation. Christian arrived just as darkness was settling over the ocean. The spot was perfect. A protected cove with deep water close to shore and a coral reef that attracted schools of bait fish during night hours. He set up his gear methodically, rigging the heavy equipment he'd need for the monsters that prowled these waters after sunset. As Christian waded into about 6 feet of crystal clear water to cast beyond the reef break, everything seemed perfect. The water was so clear he could see the white sand bottom, even in starlight, and he'd already landed 2 nice fish when disaster struck. Moving through the water to reposition for a better cast, Christian's foot slipped on wet volcanic rock. He fell hard against sharp coral formations, opening a deep gash on his leg. Blood immediately began streaming into the pristine water around him. Local Hawaiian fishermen had warned about increased predator activity during night hours, but Christian had fished these waters countless times. What he didn't know was that the remote location had become a hunting ground for one of the ocean's most dangerous predators. As Christian tried to assess his injury in the dim light, he realized the cut was deeper than expected. His splashing and the metallic scent of blood created the perfect storm of stimuli that trigger a predator's hunting instincts. Unknown to Christian, he had attracted the attention of Hawaii's apex predator. Tiger sharks are perfectly adapted for nighttime hunting in both shallow and deep waters, earning them the nickname waste basket of the sea because they'll eat virtually anything. Their stomachs have contained license plates, tires, and even other sharks. These massive sharks can grow up to 18 feet long and possess an indiscriminate appetite that makes them particularly deadly during nighttime hours when they move into shallow water to hunt. Tiger sharks can detect blood from several hundred yards away, and their lateral line system senses the slightest vibrations in the water, making escape nearly impossible once they lock onto a target. Christian began wading toward shore, but his movements became increasingly erratic as blood loss affected his coordination. The coral cut was more serious than he'd thought. and the metallic scent drifting through the water was like ringing a dinner bell for every predator in the area. The 10-foot tiger shark had been patrolling the reef edge when Christian's blood trail reached its sensitive nostrils. Unlike more cautious reef sharks, tiger sharks are known for their bold, reckless approach to anything in their territory, especially during nighttime hunting hours when they become most active. Christian never saw death coming through the dark water. The attack was sudden and devastating. The tiger shark struck from the side, its massive jaws clamping down on his injured leg with crushing force. The impact knocked Christian off his feet, sending him tumbling in the deeper water. The predator's attack was relentless and indiscriminate. Tiger sharks are known for their tenacious grip, often holding prey while using their muscular bodies to roll and tear. The shark maintained its grip while striking with its powerful tail, creating a whirlpool of violence. What makes tiger shark attacks particularly horrific is their feeding behavior. Once they taste blood, they enter a feeding frenzy, biting repeatedly until prey stops moving. Christian fought desperately, but the predator's grip was unbreakable, and each movement only intensified the attack. The ocean can give so much joy, but it can also take everything away in an instant. I've read accounts of the tiger sharks off Hawaii, hunting under the cover of darkness with an appetite that seems indiscriminate, and I can't help but feel a sense of unease. There's the story of Christian, for instance. His screams echoed across the empty beach, but no one was there to hear them. When morning came, they found his truck and fishing gear, but Christian himself had vanished. A massive search followed, helicopters and hundreds of volunteers, but it was 4 days before they found his body 8 miles away, and it's not just tiger sharks. On November 8, 2017, the same ocean off the rugged Northern California coast was about to remind everyone that even the most experienced watermen are never truly safe. That day, the morning fog lifted to reveal the dramatic rocky coastline of Fort Ross, where Pacific swells crashed against the ancient sea stacks. It was perfect diving weather for Ryan Walsh, a 29-year-old commercial abalone diver. He'd spent 6 years in those frigid waters, free diving to depths that would terrify most recreational divers. Those who knew him described him as methodical and safety-conscious, but also driven by an almost obsessive pursuit of the perfect abalone beds hidden in the rocky depths. He launched his small boat that morning with his dive partner, Marcus, a younger diver who looked up to Ryan as a mentor. They chose a productive rocky reef in 25 feet of water. It was a challenging location with strong currents, kelp forests, and the ever-present danger of entanglement in abandoned fishing nets. As Ryan suited up in his thick wetsuit, he must have felt that familiar mixture of excitement and apprehension. The water was a bone-chilling 55 degrees, but he'd built up a tolerance over years. The first few dives went perfectly. He descended through the kelp canopy to the rocky bottom, where clusters of red abalone clung like living jewels. His experienced eye identified the legal specimens, and his practiced hands pried them loose with surgical precision. But on his 7th dive, disaster struck. Working to free a particularly large abalone, his fin became entangled in abandoned fishing nets. The nearly invisible monofilament wrapped around his leg like a spider's web. holding him against the rocky bottom as his air supply ran dangerously low. After a desperate struggle, he managed to cut through enough netting to break free and made an emergency ascent, lungs burning as he fought through the kelp toward the sunlight. When he finally surfaced, he was exhausted, disoriented, and dangerously far from his boat. What he didn't realize was that his distressed movements had attracted the attention of California's apex predator, the great white shark. These sharks are living fossils, patrolling these waters for millions of years. They're perfectly adapted to hunt in the kelp forests where seals and sea lions congregate, reaching impressive sizes, sometimes 12 to 16 feet long and weighing over 3,000 pounds. Their torpedo-shaped bodies can launch them completely out of the water with explosive bursts of speed. They have an incredible sensory system, able to detect electrical fields from several meters away and track blood trails from 500 yards. During autumn, mature great whites patrol northern California in greater numbers, following the migration patterns of their preferred prey. These sharks are incredibly intelligent, capable of learning and adapting hunting strategies, making them unpredictable and extremely dangerous to humans who venture into their territory. Marcus, watching from 300 yards away, immediately recognized something was wrong. Ryan floated motionless at the surface, clearly in distress. Marcus started the engine and raced toward his partner, but the distance must have seemed impossibly far. The 13-foot great white had been patrolling the kelp beds when it detected Ryan's emergency ascent. The shark's acute senses picked up the electrical impulses from his rapidly beating heart, the scent of abalone in his collection bag, and the erratic movements of a creature in distress, all triggers activating its predatory instincts. Ryan never saw the attack coming. The great white struck from below with devastating force, its massive jaws clamping down on his torso with a bite force reaching 4,000 pounds per square inch, slicing through his wetsuit and into his vital organs. The shark's initial bite was exploratory, typical great white behavior with unfamiliar prey, but the damage was already catastrophic. I still remember the shock that rippled through the abalone diving community when Ryan died. The new safety regulations, Marcus becoming an instructor. It all felt like too little, too late. It's haunting to think of those great whites still patrolling the kelp forests, ancient and precise. But hundreds of miles south in Florida, another tragedy was about to unfold, one that would turn a spear fishing competition into a nightmare. August 14th, 2013. The morning sun sparkled on the water near Jupiter Inlet, Florida. It was perfect for the annual South Florida spearfishing tournament. Alex Paul, a 33-year-old construction foreman from Miami, couldn't have asked for better conditions. He lived for these clear waters, honing his breath-holding and spear gun skills. He was no professional, but he had the respect of the community. That morning, Alex joined 40 other competitors. The target species were cobia, kingfish, and grouper. Alex had scouted the area and had some promising spots in mind. The competition began at sunrise, and Alex and his dive buddy Carlos headed to a reef in 30 feet of water where baitfish attracted larger predators. The water was crystal clear, with 80-foot visibility. For a couple of hours, Alex had moderate success. But as the morning wore on, he became determined to find a trophy fish. Then he spotted it. A massive cobia cruising the reef edge. It was magnificent, easily 50 pounds and worth maximum points. Alex hyperventilated, dove, and struck the fish perfectly behind the gills. But the wounded cobia took off for deeper water. In his excitement, Alex became separated from Carlos and the other divers. He was alone in an isolated section of the reef. The wounded cobia's struggle created a blood trail as Alex fought to control the powerful fish. Finally, he surfaced with his prize, bleeding from cuts and exhausted. The combination of fish blood and human blood, along with the dying cobia's struggles, created the perfect storm, triggering the predatory instincts of every shark in the vicinity. What Alex didn't realize was that he had attracted one of Florida's most dangerous predators. Bull sharks. They're perfectly adapted to Florida's warm coastal waters. They can even survive in freshwater. These hunters typically reach 6 to 8 feet and have specialized kidneys that regulate salt content in their blood. They can appear anywhere, from the open ocean to golf course ponds miles inland. Their sensory system is incredible, allowing them to detect vibrations from struggling fish hundreds of yards away and sense electrical fields from several meters. Unlike other shark species, bull sharks are known for their bold, direct approach to potential food sources. They often compete directly with spear fishermen for their catch. Their aggressive nature and opportunistic feeding behavior, combined with their ability to strike repeatedly, make them one of the most feared predators in American waters. A 7-foot bull shark had been patrolling the reef when the scent of blood reached its nostrils from hundreds of yards away. The predator's acute senses detected electrical fields generated by both the struggling fish and Alex's rapidly beating heart. Alex saw the shark approaching and tried releasing his catch, hoping to distract it with the wounded cobia. But bull sharks are opportunistic feeders with insatiable appetites, and multiple potential prey items only intensified their aggressive behavior. Instead of taking the offered fish, the water turned crimson. It's a stark image, isn't it? A reminder of how quickly the ocean can shift from serene to savage. During a spearfishing tournament, Alex, one of the most respected members of the community, was attacked by a bull shark. The shark struck with incredible force, its jaws clamping down on his leg. The bite severed major blood vessels, and the multiple strikes caused devastating tissue damage. Alex fought back, punching at the shark's snout, desperately trying to reach his dive knife. But the bull shark continued its assault relentlessly, striking again and again. Other divers, alerted by the commotion and the spreading blood, raced to Alex's aid. They found him floating unconscious, his spear gun and the wounded cobia drifting nearby. The bull shark had vanished, leaving behind only the horrifying evidence of its attack. Despite immediate first aid and a Coast Guard helicopter evacuation, Alex died from massive blood loss during the 40-minute flight to the trauma center. The tournament was immediately canceled, and the spearfishing community was left in mourning. But Alex's death wasn't in vain. It led to enhanced safety protocols at tournaments. There were new requirements for divers to stay closer to their buddies, and organizers began providing emergency response training. The association even established a memorial fund to promote safer diving practices. It's a small consolation, perhaps, but it's a way to honor Alex's memory and prevent future tragedies.